If you've ever seen chemical plants, obviously they're in a little disarray. That's a type of what we see. I don't know where we're at in time. I don't see a sign up, but I'll just do this real quickly. My conclusion, use a formal method to investigate. By doing that, it's going to help you get to the root causes. Get as much input as you can. Don't stop when you get that superficial solution. And if it's necessary, there's my man. Bring in a third party whenever you need one. Root causes. Management, when we talked about who's responsible for actions, we talk about management. See, in my terminology, and I appreciate all that, it's management system. It's management's job to create a series of systems that will either prevent or reduce the likelihood of an accident happening. So when I look at it and we get to the root causes, I either don't have a system that I need to build, I have a system that's poorly designed and thus doesn't give me the outcome that I want, or I have a poorly implemented system. Examples of poor implementation is removing the Freon from the refrigeration system, unplugging those alarms out in the community. Cultural norms. I don't want you to forget that 70% of the people were disciplined for doing their job correctly. Think about what kind of a mentality that puts in an individual. I'm not going to do my job correctly because if I do, I get in trouble. So culturally, they set up a horrible work environment. Communication failures. So again, I'm in the threes. Management system, cultural norms, communication failures. The hospital knew nothing about the chemicals that were used in that plant. And when people came, there was nothing they could do. All right, I'm 5 minutes early. I'm trying to give a little time back after lunch. Thank you all for this.
We have some mementos. Mike, okay, before the next speaker, we'll just talk a little bit about what might have happened and how much you have absorbed after lunch, long lunch. Okay. I want volunteers before I point out somebody. Is there any volunteer to stand up and say what we discussed? Okay, I will stay in the front. At least we can recognize the ones who try to listen to the presentation. Anyone? Stephen, they did not understand anything. Or okay, there is one bold individual.
This was a very excellent one.
Yes. Please come this side. Please tell me what you learned from this presentation.
How to identify the opportunities and method to find the root causes. Yes. Sir.
Okay. At least you said one of them. Okay. We congratulate you for that. And you deserve a little recognition, and so you get some recognition. Thank you. Thank you. Look at all that. One person who raised hands. Rest of the people, you're going to have something? Okay. Okay. Tell me what. One second. Tell me what you learned from this presentation. Say your name.
Good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Madhusudan, and I'm from RVC Civil Department. So, as Stephen sir was explaining, so it is important to know about the after effects of accidents investigation. He also briefed about the Bhopal gas tragedy that was held in 1984, and also he also said some root causes for it, like he had management issues and all, which was actually should have been addressed.
Good. Wonderful. He said a few more things than the other individual, so we really want to recognize you with a memento. Thank you. Anyone else? You have one? You are on faculty, right? You have a question? Okay. Come on over. Okay, Stephen, a question for you. Pick up another mic. Give him a mic. Please come. Give Stephen a mic.
Actually, the tragedy that happened in 1984, it was in Bhopal. The company was Union Carbide. So, because of that tragedy, what legal action was taken on him?
I go back, I did about 3 hours of research. So I'm not going to tell you I know all the legal action. I do know that initially that the chief executive officer for the company involved, and I try not to use names, but I appreciate where you're at in any of them. I never use names of organizations if I don't have to. But that organization, he came to India and he was immediately arrested. But he was only in jail or custody, I should probably call that, for about 24 hours. He was released by the Indian government and he left shortly thereafter. So from a legal perspective, that's all I know. And from a liability perspective, I saw the data. Because I was trying to concentrate on the safety side, I didn't really look at the liability piece. So sorry, I don't have the data.
Thank you, Stephen. Do you like to recognize this faculty? Any of you have anything? Please come here. We would like to recognize you. Yeah. Okay. Here is something, Stephen, come. Here is something for you as a recognition of your participation. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. There's one more question. So be quick.
So, how important is environmental clearance during this strategy? How important is it for environmental clearance during the?
Say your name and.
My name is Lohit. I'm from RVC.
The environmental clearance?
Yes.
Oops, let me back away so
Stay
we're not
away.
too close. And again, these two questions I'm not going to do well on. Now, we may have someone else in the committee that can talk about it. I'm not an environmental consultant. I'm a safety and health person. So I don't think I have that answer. We can do some research, but I don't have an answer, unfortunately.
I have a question. I'm Dr. Shashi Shankar. I'm the conference chair here. Only one clarification. We had a recently, right, in Visakhapatnam, there's a LG gas tragedy. It was really very unfortunate that many people were affected and it was a very bad incident. Do you know something about why it happened? LG refrigeration.
Liquid gas you're talking about?
Company.
No, I do not. No, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. You don't get any recognition, but you are the chair of the conference. So, next presentation, please.
I would like to welcome Mrs. Adrienne Borges and Robert West for the next session.
Thank you. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk about a different aspect of hazardous materials management. You've heard about the types of hazardous materials that react or create industrial accidents, and I'm going to talk to you about the types of materials that we use every day, and over time we find they cause a problem in our environment. And what do we do about those? How do we address those? So let me share a little story. On December 26th, 2023, a baby orca was born, a whale. It was born in Puget Sound, in the waters off of Seattle, in Washington Street. Its mother was named J40. On January 29th, 2024, the baby, named J60, was missing and presumed dead. The family that this whale belonged to now only has 75 members left, and the family is struggling to survive. So what's happening here? Anyone have an idea? We talked about cause, immediate cause, and we talked about root cause. So what do you think the immediate cause is with this baby dying? Okay, quite simply, toxic chemicals. Chemicals we use every day that get into the waters of Puget Sound. Chemicals like PCBs and polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which are flame retardants, they concentrate in the fat of the whales. And when the mother gives milk to her baby, the baby is poisoned. But there's something else that's happening here too. It's associated with this fish. You see the fish? What do you think is happening with the fish? There's a toxic chemical that's in tire rubber, and I'll talk about it. It gets into the stormwater, and it's immediately lethal to the fish. This fish is the sole food of that whale. So what do you think is happening? The whale is starving, right? And a whale starves, it eats its blubber, and the toxic chemicals that are in the blubber get into the milk that feed the baby. So I'm going to talk to you today about why these chemicals that we use every day that don't seem really like a big deal to us are a big deal in our environment and our ecosystem. And after that, Bob's going to give a really good discussion about a specific one. So what are contaminants of emerging concern? They are basically chemicals. We use them every day. We're very familiar with them. They've probably been used for a long time. Suddenly, we start to realize that they have environmental or health effects. But they have no regulatory standard because we didn't think they were a bad thing. Many are persistent in the environment, and they have societal acceptance. We've been told we need these chemicals. We need them to do something for us, either for our benefit or to manage a risk. They're not easily removed in wastewater. So we see here we have four sort of big categories: flame retardants, pharmaceuticals, synthetic estrogens, and what I call nanoparticles and microparticles, so microplastics and nanoparticles. All of these chemicals have a history, and I'm going to share chemicals that are not of emerging concern because I want you to understand how are we going to address these chemicals that aren't regulated right now. Because when they're not regulated, they're still being used, and when they're still being used, they're still getting into the environment, and the whale is still eating the fish, and it's still being affected. So first of all, there's a problem identification. We realize the salmon are dying. We don't know why, but they're dying. So we know there's a problem, and we need to figure it out. In order to figure it out, we need to have analytical methods, and you heard the discussion about GC mass spec today. That's an important tool for identifying what is that chemical that's killing the salmon. Then we need to do an environmental assessment. We need to figure out, is it in the water, is it in the air, is it in the fish, is it in the soil, what is it, and how does it move through this environment, and what's getting exposed to it, and how, and what are the effects. So even though we know there may be a problem, there's still a lot of unknown science that needs to happen. At some point, somebody is being affected by something. Maybe it's in their well water. Maybe they finally realize that for 40 years, they've been drinking this thing that now we think is a health problem. So we have public awareness, and it quickly leads to outrage. And I will submit to you that outrage is a good thing. It's a good thing because if there's outrage, there will be regulation. So let me quickly go through some contaminants that are no longer emerging. We already know about them, and what I want you to pay attention to when I do these slides is the timeline. How long does it take for a chemical to go from, hey, we think there's a problem, to actual regulation? So DDT, 32 to 56 years. It was first manufactured in 1940. You'll find a lot of these chemicals were first manufactured in 1940 or first used for commercially in 1940. And it was in the 50s and the 60s that they recognized that DDT was thinning the eggshells of birds, and our bird, the eagle, was going extinct because it couldn't reproduce. And a famous book by Rachel Carson called Silent Spring brought this to the awareness stage, and people suddenly realized that something was going on. So 32 years later, EPA canceled the use, and shortly after that, the United Nations Environmental Program put it on the list of persistent organic pollutants. But I think it is still allowed for certain uses, specifically to control malaria. So there's a risk calculation here that malaria might be worse than an occasional use of DDT. The Stockholm Convention is what is international treaty or convention that is really an important tool for eliminating these CECs. And as we talk about the things that it has regulated, we realize that this is a tool for regulating contaminants moving forward. PCB is a chemical that was used for many years in electrical uses, transformers, etc. Here's a 1945 again, large-scale production, wide-scale commercial use. And that was when it was, along with DDT, in the 1950s and 60s were discovered to be a problem. So we see here that it took 41 years to start to regulate PCBs, and it wasn't until 2001 that it had a recognition as an international persistent organic pollutant. Ozone depleting substances, 58 years. Those were used as refrigerants and for foam blowing, and we know that those cause damage to the ozone. layer. It protects us from UV exposure. It wasn't until 1985, someone hypothesized, hey, ozone's a problem, but it wasn't until 1985 that they actually proved it, at which point the Montreal Protocol, which banned it, was passed. Greenhouse gases. We talk about this all the time today, but guess what? 200 years plus. Because some people are still arguing about this topic. In the 1800s, there were early theories that explored this as a possibility. There was weather reports that was beginning to corroborate this. 1989, the International Panel on Climate Change formed to share scientific, political, and economic impacts. So, this concept of political, economic, and social transformation is essential for us to address climate change. All right, let's talk quickly about why it is we don't just say, hey, it causes problems, let's just regulate it, right? Well, first of all, we have, especially in the 80s when many of these chemicals were being sort of mass produced, and there's a new chemical every month. We had the producers with a real vested interest in making that chemical worthwhile to us. This ad has some key phrases I'd like to share with you. It says, life is a chemical. And with chemicals, companies like Monsanto are working to help improve the quality of life. They're working to help improve the quality of life. They don't say they are improving it, they're working to help improve it. And the challenge here is to use the chemical properly. So the implication is that the Monsanto chemical is okay if it's used properly, and if there's a problem with it, then it is the consumer who has not used it properly. And lastly, down at the bottom it says, without chemicals, life itself would be impossible. So consumers were bombarded with these types of ads and new technologies and new chemicals and new things we need to have and had to have over the years. And we were forced at some level to make a risk assessment. We were forced to decide, do we want this flame retardant chemical because the risk of something bad happening if we don't put out that fire is greater than the risk of putting a chemical on that fire that lasts forever. We need to make those choices in our society, and that's what we did with flame retardants. In my state, we have a regulatory disconnect with PCBs. The state of Washington has a very, very strict water quality standard, but EPA's laws and rules allow, I think it's 1 billion times higher concentration of PCBs in products, in certain products. And we can't meet our water quality standard if companies are allowed to produce PCBs. So we petitioned EPA in January to address what we call the regulatory gap. And then lastly, I'd like to point out that most of this discussion involves chemicals that have impacts maybe expressed as 1 in a million chance of cancer. Those concepts are really hard for the average person to understand. If it's your auntie that got cancer, is she the 1 in a million? Or was that the cause, or is that another cause? And so on an individual level, we have a hard time understanding what 1 in a million means and what a risk assessment means. Back to the whale. So this whale is important to our native tribes in Washington state. The whale and the salmon are fundamental to their religious beliefs, to their economy, to their social structure. So when the whale goes extinct, yes, it's a huge loss, but it's also extinction of a culture in our society. It's a barrier to addressing that if we don't understand and recognize the importance of an animal. How many of you have seen an orca? So a few people up here have seen an orca, but guess what? If you haven't seen an orca, maybe it's hard for you to understand how very important it is, and maybe you don't want to participate in regulating that chemical that's killing the salmon. How am I doing? Okay. Okay. All right, so here's some lessons learned. CECs are generally commonly accepted and used chemicals, and you're probably using them today. For example, I like PFAS dental floss, right? I like Teflon dental floss. I use it all the time. It would be hard for me to give it up, quite frankly. So there's a common acceptance of some of these chemicals, but the time between first starting to use those and an awareness of this problem can be decades. Did you see the time frames on those slides? It's longer than you've been alive, right? It's several generations sometimes before we recognize that this thing is a problem and we need to do something about it. With greenhouse gases, it was 5 generations. So when these CECs cause global problems, they do require global solutions, and as a result, we expect and need social change and economic tools to address them. So let's talk really quickly about 6-PPD quinone, which is the chemical in the tire that's causing the salmon to die. So the chemical on the left is what they put in the tires, and the chemical on the right is what happens when it reacts with ozone. The chemical on the right will get into stormwater, and fish such as this one, which is going to spawn, if it survived, it would have spawned, dies within hours when it's exposed to stormwater with this chemical. We have some solutions to this problem. We don't have all. But one would be, for example, putting in green infrastructure that is a barrier to that chemical from entering into the stormwater. And so what are we doing in our state to address this, since we understand how important this is for the salmon and the whales? First of all, we are looking at how do we understand the problem better. Remember, I talked about analytical tools and understanding what is really the effect and how do we address it. Second of all, we are funding, our agency funds many green stormwater projects. So changing the stormwater from direct discharge into the sound to putting in green, grassy swales and structures that keep that chemical from getting to the water. And then lastly, safer chemicals that could replace the 6-PPD. Safer chemicals is an interesting topic, I will say, because sometimes we find safer chemicals and they're not necessarily safer. So we always have to have that word of caution when we're trying to find solutions. It's been 70 years since 6-PPD quinone, since the point we started adding to it and the point at which we have a regulatory strategy. Although I will say the awareness has been far less than that. 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So, one more. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no worries. Okay.
Well, they take a couple minutes. Let me kind of introduce what I would like to talk about. One particular chemical that's become of interest to most regulators in a lot of our water-related states that have big rivers or transmission, but via water, is called PFAS, which is per- and polyfluorinated alkyl substances. It's a whole group of chemicals, but as we learned from Adrian, these types of things were invented many, many years ago. In the 1940s, the companies that invented them oftentimes had really not understood what the uses might be. They put together a chemical and thought these properties might be useful down the road. Eventually, when marketers got a hold of them and realized what they could do with them, they started to put them into products that are commonly used by humans, and it got into the food chain because the products they put them into are the very pots and pans that we use every day to cook our food. So now PFAS is in our bodies, it's in our blood. Yes, that's it. Thank you. So, thank you. The products that began to be used, like Teflon is the product. The product that they began to use them in became the leverage, economic leverage, by which they were turned into other products. So a property of PFAS is if you spray it on clothing, it repels water. So we all use Scotchgard once in a while to keep things dry if we're going camping. What we didn't realize when it became most marketed, probably in the 70s and 80s, maybe early 90s, is that it comes off of that clothing. It comes off of whatever it's actually sprayed onto. And that results in our ingestion, because we put it on our hands, we put our hands in our mouth, or it goes through our skin. So now we have another issue to deal with. The last thing that it was widely used for probably became the primary reason it became so interesting to regulators. Companies that make firefighting equipment realized that it was really good, this chemical was really good at spreading on top of a water or a surfactant type bubble of air and smothering a fire. It was continuous, it didn't break down, it was thermally inactive, it wouldn't burn, and it was easily portable in a concentrated solution to make a dilute solution to actually fight the fire. So all those elements turn it into what we call AFFF, or aqueous film fighting foam. AFFF. AFFF became the standard for the military to use. So now we have another element of our society that's now spreading the use of something we really don't understand how it affects humans, or how it accumulates, essentially. So AFFF became the words that regulators focused on when it comes to regulating PFAS. Now, I said there's a whole range of chemicals here. I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly because this presentation is kind of long. I'll hit on the key points as we go, but as that basis, you kind of get the idea that science is driving the answers to our conveniences by virtue of marketers putting those things that they invent in the forms that we commonly use without general population knowledge of how they affect us, what happens to us. So what is PFAS? It's more than 4,700 compounds. This is old. We're looking at regulating maybe 30 right now in the US. but it's most likely that well over that 29, 30 compounds will eventually be regulated. And the reason is that although there are certain ones that are really good at accumulating or affecting our bodies, there's some, as they get to hydrocarbon chain gets longer, that don't affect as much, but they still create an effect. So this describes them. Teflon, Kynar, Neoflon, Tefsil, those are all trade names for what we know as PFAS. So try to not whistle in your ear. What does it do? It bioaccumulates. It has a very low, no observable effect kind of level. It's easily detectable, but it's very stable. It's a disruptor of our endocrine systems, so our hormones get affected by this. Toxicity-wise, we just kind of ignored it because it's a long-term accumulator. There's a child in Wisconsin whose mother, he's now about 6, I think, his mother drank a water source from a well that was heavily contaminated with PFAS. His liver now has some 400 parts per billion of PFAS in the tissue. His liver probably won't survive eventually, but he's still an active kid. We are looking at what happens to those individuals that get bioaccumulated concentrations that are so great from very, very small amounts that pass through our chain to that child. It's 400 parts per trillion, sorry. Well, we have a difficult time seeing the environment. I'm going to do this relatively quickly. PFAS likes to have an organic area to harbor itself. When we go into streams and rivers, there's lots of organic stuff. And eventually it pairs up with the sludge, let me keep moving away from this. The sludge or the sediment or anything that's flowing in the stream that has an organic content to it. And so when Brandon gets it at the lab, or any lab gets a sample from that kind of material, the difficulty is extracting it so you can measure it. And so what we're finding in the process of creating regulations is we can't reliably reproduce data that will allow us to set levels that we believe are health protective. There's a definition for you. Now I'm going to talk about specific elements or specific types of PFAS. Octanoic acid, that's one of those that is most toxic, we believe, and we find it regulated in some states in the single parts per trillion. You remember the child at 400 parts per trillion in his body? Now we're talking about regulating anything we ingest at 7. An incredible difference. That defines our learning span. What we didn't know and how we allowed things to get too far down the road with this chemical before we decided to do something about it. The sulfate version of it. These are 8-member chemicals. That's also very bioaccumulative. Non-noic acid, you'll see there's a range here of chains of hydrocarbon that fix a sulfonate version or an acid version that creates something that we need to regulate. How do we determine it? Well, our friend over here, Rick, told us how we determine it. We really have a hard time separating it from all media, though. It's difficult to understand how to do that. I work with a group called the American Society of Testing Materials, which is really waiting on our EPA to come up with the actual numbers to define what the levels we need to see. But we're developing protocols to do various media. EPA now accepts certain protocols that they have developed themselves, but it's still in the works, so to speak. Last definition, parts per trillion. When we talk about PCBs, we're talking about parts per billion, parts per million, sometimes in oil. So now we're going down 1 million times from what was originally regulated to parts per trillion. And in some cases, we have to have detection limits that are in the parts per quadrillion to achieve some confidence interval. Here's a quick look. These have changed somewhat too. It's developing. New Jersey, that's the East Coast version. California is regulating down to the parts per quadrillion already. Michigan. These are all going to be U.S. examples. I'm sorry, guys, but that's all we really have to go with. From your perspective, you just need to be thinking down the road, what is it? What's this chemical? What's it come from? How do I look at maybe knowing what I need to do to contain it in the future? Those are drinking water standards. These are accepted analytical methods. Look them up. Just become familiar with the process of analyzing for it. Realize that it's probably in your water, it's probably in your soil, it's probably in your body today. You just need to know that it exists, it's emerging, and somebody's going to say, you have to control this within a certain range of concentrations. We've talked about the media making it difficult. 4,700 compounds, and its precursors and the like that come along the way. This will go through much what I talked about the other day in terms of assessment. Data quality standards are the entire being of getting an analytical method published. We need to understand how data quality affects the analysis of these substances in various matrices. Obviously, we went through this in my presentation the other day, assessment. These are the steps. Let's think about them because you're going to be affected by them. You're going to have to understand how to measure what PFAS is doing to your body and to your environment. Further definition of data quality objectives, I don't want to go into that. The level of the deliverable analyses packages. So now there are techniques, and I'll talk mostly about the techniques and some about the regulations, but the analytical techniques are becoming more mobile and more able to analyze at detection limits that are lower. So we can start looking at nearly direct read times, but right now you send a sample, the lab may take a few weeks to come back to you with a data package. So what do you do with this stuff? Well, I just finished a project in mid-US, upper area of Canada, where a manufacturer of these kinds of materials had a warehouse burned down in a very regulated area already in terms of water quality. We wound up collecting all the firefighting water in a little pond at the end of the building, and we eventually pumped out, containerized, and shipped to deep wells all that water that had parts per trillion of PFAS in it. It took about 3 to 6 months. we had to keep these outside containers heated during the winter because it's kind of cold up there. It's somewhere around 32 below Celsius a lot of days. We eventually had to excavate that pond and the tributary that went to the river because the sediments had parts per trillion above regulatory requirements. So I encourage you to think about this because I think emerging chemicals are the way that you'll be involved with. That's your future. This one in particular is right at the top of the heap right now. I'll leave it at that. But thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Oh, there's one. Do we have a microphone? We have a question.
Oh, you're the same guy. Okay, go ahead. Sir, out of all the techniques listed to detect the different chemicals and different concentration, like how the concentration should be, what do you think should be the primary parameter to test all these? Like, is there a universal method to detect at least half of it? Did you follow?
What method could you use universally to quantify?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the universal method is GCMS right now. Everything that Rick talked about fits. What we're finding is the steps preparing the sample so that we can efficiently see it in the machine are very convoluted. The more we do work with organic-based matrices that have these chemicals in them, the more we realize that we have to have specialized prep methods. So you'll see GCMS is the answer. It's just how do you get it in the machine to analyze it. That's what's being worked out now.
Thanks, Bob. Lois has a presentation for you. Here is a recognition memento for you for asking the question. Okay, proceed.
Excuse me, sir.
Bob, there is another person.
Myself Aditya, and I'm from ISC department, AMCEC Engineering College. I need to have a clarification that is that carbon border tax is going to help for the present situation, and is it the perfect time to apply the carbon border tax, or it has to be implemented it before?
I didn't know what you were applying. I didn't hear that.
Carbon. Can you hear me, sir? No, can you? Like, is the carbon border tax what we are applying now? Is it the perfect time to apply the carbon border tax, or it has to be implemented before? As we all know that carbon is going harmful for our nature. So, what you are going to say about, is it to be implemented before itself, or is the perfect time to implement the carbon border tax?
Carbon tax. Is this the time to implement carbon tax on this pollution? Is that correct? Yes.
I think if we invented regulations that put a carbon tax on these kinds of chemicals, we would see very low contributions to the fund, whatever monies we're raising, because it doesn't take a lot of PFAS to put out a fire. It doesn't take that much to coat a pan. It's not going to be a large carbon consumer. What we really need to look at is what's the fluorinated, we're looking at whatever kinds of organics are created with fluorine or chlorine in them that can harm our bodies, that get into us and stay there. if we were looking to tax something, that's where I would look. But I don't think a carbon tax is going to solve PFAS.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. Is there any mementos for this individual? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. I want to ask a question because these individuals asked a question to the presenter. Now let me ask a question to one of you. Who would like to be ready to be asked a question? Everybody is turning on the other side and they are bending their... Anyone? Oh, you are there. No, you already answered question. Let me pick someone else. So I had a question this side. Let me go this side. Okay. Anybody? No. No phone. Let me pick up this gentleman. Okay, come this side. Okay, here is a question for you. Right. What did you hear from the previous presenter about? What did he talk about? Oh, that's not an excuse because we came late. That's not an excuse, my friend. Salpa talisman. You did not, how long you stayed here? Huh? Just 5 minutes? Do you think your friends came earlier? Oh, what an excuse. So please sit down. Okay. You have a question or you are ready to be answered?
I'm ready to answer.
Okay. So let me ask you the same question. What did you hear from the presenter about in the previous presentation?
So good afternoon, one and all. I'm B. Satish Subramani from AMCEC, Civil Engineering, 3rd year. So today, sir explained about the PFAS substance, which is known as per and polyfluoronated substances, like which it is causing this water bodies and this aquatic lives in there. And sir explained many things about handling this with proper treatment and management systems, and few types of this PFAS substances in there. And yes.
Okay, thank you. He deserves some recognition if anyone has something. Thank you. Okay. Nice pictures. Okay. Okay. For this presentation, those are the questions and comments. So next presentation, please.
I would like to welcome again Adrian Borges, ma'am, for the next session.
Thank you. So this should be an easy topic, right? Environment, justice. You know what environment is. You know what justice is, right? I will tell you as a regulator, it's a very layered and nuanced topic, and it's something we spend lots of time discussing when we make environmental decisions. So, what is environmental justice? It's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people. and that no group of people should disproportionately bear the harms and the benefits of a project. Sometimes it's hard to figure out which people we're talking about and who needs to be involved. How do we find them? Do they care? Lots of questions we have to ask ourselves, and how do we reach out to them, and how do we connect with them? So let me give you a few tips. And there were some management people in here, right? Some management students? You probably will have to go through an exercise similar to this if you were involved in planning a major project or siting a facility. So let me go through this with you. First of all, this is a U.S. perspective. And the U.S. perspective first had some regulation behind it in 1994 when there was an executive order from the president that required our federal agencies to look at how they make decisions and to create a strategy so that their work was non-discriminatory and that they had public participation. Oh, and the second part of this is a new concept, equity. And equity was introduced in 2022 with another presidential executive order. Consistent, fair, just, and impartial. So when we talk about EJ issues, and you can look on the internet for EJ issues, and you'll find lots of different interpretations of them, but generally, one common thread is that they involve siting of a facility or a project, or perhaps cleaning up a mess. And they involve land, and they involve people, and they often involve people who don't own the land, but maybe live there and may or may not have access to the decision-making process. So the three here are some examples I'll share with you. Anyone know what this is a picture of here? It's someplace in India. It's someplace you heard about today, about an hour ago. It's Bhopal. Good job. Okay. So these are the houses in Bhopal that are located across the street from the Bhopal facility. And it's interesting to note that when it comes to environmental justice, it's often the facilities that move into an area because it's easy to do siting there, it's easy to construct the facility, and they probably won't run into a lot of opposition. So if that community is disadvantaged, they're disadvantaged in the process as well. And that's what we want to talk about. So how did this concept evolve, right? Was India a colonial state at one point? Was there somebody here in India running your land, your resources, your business, your economics for you? Right? So European cultures bring this concept about that the world was theirs to slice up and devour. It happened in the United States. It happened here. And in a certain period of time in the history of the country, the economic needs of the state were more important than the economic needs and the other needs of the native peoples. So then how does this lead to environmental justice today? Well, the fact is that our legal system, and as well as India, really has a basis in the British law. And in British law, the land ethic is very strong. And over time, these attitudes get codified into our planning legislation and the rules that we use to make decisions about land use and how do we allow facilities to be located in certain areas. Because of these laws, and also because of social attitudes, there are systemic barriers to people who have access. So in part, environmental justice is about providing access to decision makers. Some of those barriers is that we just don't know. As a regulatory agency, I don't always know who the EJ community is or if they want to be involved or if they need to be involved. And it's my responsibility to try to figure that out. But sometimes that community doesn't have the ability to engage. Let's say it's a single mother who doesn't have time to go to the community meeting to give her input on whatever the project is or whatever the regulation is. Or language, right? Language could be a barrier. And the government needs to do the outreach, right? To figure that out. Maybe that means providing translation services. Sometimes there's just outright exclusion and discrimination that happens for whatever reason, just because we're humans and we do this sometimes. So here's an example of this discrimination that happened in our country. And I'm going to point out how it's environmental justice today. So the insurance companies in the 1920s did a process called redlining. And they drove around cities and they looked at neighborhoods. And if someone was black or brown living in that neighborhood, they redlined it. They told the financial institutions, this is not a good risk for you. Don't loan money in this neighborhood. As a result, the black and brown people systemically were not able to get loans. They couldn't get home loans, they couldn't get business loans. And so their community over time suffered an economic disparity. And if you don't have land, sometimes you also don't have access to the political power. Here are the red line areas in my community, 1929. So in those areas that are marked in red, those communities had black or brown people living in them, and they were not able to get lending for housing. So what's happening today in those red areas? 1956, the Federal Highway Act went in, and so they needed to put a freeway in. Do you think they put the freeway in the yellow and green areas at the bottom, where the rich people live? They put the freeway in, and you can see there's a match. The red circles there are the red-lined areas, and the freeway is that orange line that goes from east to west. There's another freeway going in north to south today, and it's in a red line area as well. So there's this legacy. There's a legacy that happened from something that happened in 1929. And why is that in environmental justice? Well, this map is a map of our air quality in Spokane. And you can see there is a match, somewhat, between PM 2.5, particulate matter, its presence in our city, and that freeway, probably not a surprise. But also you can see the red line area again up in the top right corner of that map. So why is this environmental justice? Once again, this is a map of the health effects, the health prevalence of asthma, because we know asthma is connected to PM 2.5. And once again, we start to see alignment with the red line areas. So the point is, we do make land use decisions, and they can have impacts, and they can have impacts for generations, and maybe we can have positive impacts too. And that's what consideration of environmental justice is about. So I'm going to reframe the conversation a bit because justice is really hard to think about. What does that really mean? Everybody here probably has a different idea what justice means. Well, this is one way to think about justice. Suppose these people are watching the football game and they need assistance to see the game. Well, equality would be giving everybody a box of the same height. And we always talk about equality, right? But equality has an interesting impact because some people are going to be short. And if we give everybody the same height, not everybody can see that football game. But we could give somebody an extra box or 2 boxes and they get to see the game. That's equity. That's great, get to see the game. But the person on the right has to work harder to see the game. That person has to climb 2 boxes to get up there to see it. So when we talk about justice, we're talking about removing the barriers to being able to see the game. And that's the picture on the right where the cause of the inequity was addressed and the systemic barrier was removed. Now this is concept, and it's not always easy to put concept into play. So let's go back to red lighting. What were the equality factors in red lighting? It's a trick question because I know you don't know it. Okay, equality is the fact that we have air quality standards and they're all the same. They apply to everybody equally. Equity is that we can provide people with information about what to do. So they live in an area that has high PM 2.5. We might be able to provide them with grant information so they can inform their communities about what happens when air quality is bad. Or maybe we improve public transportation so the source is not there anymore, or provide transportation alternatives. Justice would be addressing that impact of the historic and current racism, and we know that is a tall order, but perhaps changing zoning and planning laws or rules, or changing the way we interact with those communities would make a difference. Climate change. Well, this is interesting because we recently enacted a very large law called the Washington State Climate Change Act, and we are required to consider environmental justice in this law. So what we did was we identified 16 overburdened communities based on air quality. And we were to identify it, track and share trends, and try to address what is it we need to do to provide environmental justice for air quality and also address climate change. Guess what? Look at that picture in the middle. Does that look familiar? That's the example I showed earlier. That is the overburdened community in Spokane based on air quality data. Okay, let's say this is you, and you have a project and you don't know where to begin. And you want to be socially responsible and consider the community and include them in your planning. Where do you begin? Well, it starts with addressing who is the community and where are the impacts. And often you need to go to that community. You can't expect them to come to you. You may need to visit some of their events, some of their community events, or provide information to the schools, or work with the children on it. But once you have an understanding of what you're dealing with, then the next step is to do some planning and create an EJ engagement strategy. So I'll talk about that in a second. But that basically means you need to gather and analyze the feedback you get. For you computer engineers in here, your computer science people, this is your chance here, so just a second, hang tight, and work with regulators on it. And then lastly, identify any mitigations you might need to take to provide equality, equity, and justice, whatever that looks like. So meaningful involvement is essential, and meaningful is the key word here. Involvement is important as well, but meaningful is really essential. people need to have the opportunity to participate in decisions that affect them. And as a regulator, I can say that the more we provide that opportunity up front, the easier it is to implement that project. Because they can influence our decision, and we should allow them that opportunity to tell us their concerns. And we are required in our state to actually seek out and facilitate that involvement, to provide language services, to provide access, to actually pay people if they can't otherwise attend and they need to be reimbursed to attend a meeting. And what does public engagement look like? Sometimes it's just a meeting like this, and sometimes you have people who always go to those meetings. It doesn't matter the topic, they're just there because they really like to be there. And then sometimes you have the stakeholders in that meeting who really care about what you have to say and are engaged with you. But there's this big category called everyone else. And that's the category that we want to make sure that we've addressed. That anyone who's in that everyone else category has the ability to work with us on the issue. This public engagement strategy, it needs to be meaningful and accessible. And by accessible, I mean people need to physically get there, but you may need to help them with language as well. Okay, computer people, this is where you would shine. One really effective way to get information from people is to find creative ways to survey them. Maybe a computer app, maybe doing some programming to find out what it is you're dealing with, some data research. But there are a lot of ways that you can collect this information from the public, and I think this is really, an area that's worth looking at, quite frankly. And when you're meeting the community where they are and you're communicating with them, gosh, pictures really go a long ways. And you can get a lot more interaction with people when you put information in a way that they can study other than just read it. Often a project will come down to conflict. And there are different ways to resolve conflict, and it's best to resolve it early on, right? And early on would be kind of on the left side of this page, where an agency would provide advice or maybe clarify something through policy. And as we move towards the right, we become more formal with how we resolve that conflict. And likewise, there could be agreement on issues or working on plans, or where is that facility going to be developed, how are you going to do it, and agreeing to settle a dispute. And of course, if you can't do this here, this process will probably end up in court. And we have a saying that you don't want to end up in court because the court will decide for you. So we work very hard to keep things into this realm of working together. Okay, I'm going to show you an example that will relate to you. Anybody know where this is? Any idea? What happens when you throw your stuff in the garbage here? Okay. So you know what? It's like a little bit important to understand where your garbage goes. I'll just say that. I don't know if this facility is open anymore. This was 2016, but it's Mavalapura Village, and it was used for dumping Bangalore's municipal waste. It may be closed now. The problem was that this was not managed very well, and the community around it was being exposed to the toxic chemicals that were in this waste. And it became quite political, and eventually it went to court. So 2 days ago, we met the justice who ruled on this case. And what happened? Well, there is equality here because there are solid waste management standards and air quality standards. They may not have been used. So, the equity started when there was political organization and there was a closure order from the Karnataka State Pollution Board. And there was a requirement to implement waste segregation and reduction at the source. Do you do that here in this institution? Do you have recycling and garbage and green waste? You do? You segregate your waste too? Yes. Okay. So there you go. So that's part of the equity solution to this landfill. I'm not completely sure what happened after that, but these are examples of a type of thing that could happen if you put the justice component here. If there was criminal activity, then some action along those grounds would be important. Treatment and removal of landfill waste would certainly clean it up, as well as environmental restoration. Okay, here's an example from Washington State. This is a nuclear reservation where they made plutonium, and Dr. Vishwanath is very familiar with this place. He worked there for many years. What happened was in 1944, they removed 2 towns, about 1,500 people. I'm sorry? 20 years. He was there for 20 years. He did a lot of good while he was there, too, I'm sure. Very busy. Anyway, they removed about 1,500 people, and they also affected the land grants that were from the tribes, and there was a loss of land. The tribes lost some land in that. The EJ issues include polluted soil, water, groundwater, and when you start to look at these numbers, you realize there's a lot of really nasty stuff that is still at Hanford. And they continue to work to clean it up, and it is extremely difficult. Probably the most problematic is hazardous radioactive waste that is in tanks that are decomposing over time, and there are periodically incidents associated with release of materials from those tanks. So the equality, we have standards, right? We know how to do health risk assessments. We have lots of informed stakeholders in the area, and specifically people who are called downwinders. They were people who were exposed to radioactive emissions while the plant was operating. It's been put on our cleanup list, or EPA cleanup list, and we have tribal treaties that try to rectify this. So the justice is that the remediation is ongoing, and I guess ultimately it would be great if this could be returned to its original condition, but that will probably not happen. And the best that we could do would be to stabilize or remove the wastes. All right, one more last one, and I'm bringing this one up only because sometimes we really try to do environmental justice, and our laws won't allow us to do that. So in this case, this is the Columbia River, and that red star is a dam on the river. And you remember those salmon that I talked about? Not only they have toxic chemicals they have to deal with, they have to go by all these dams, all the red and yellow spots. They have to go through all those dams to get to their homeland where they breed. At that yellow star, there's no way for them to get by. It's completely blocked. And so this fish here, this salmon that's really important for orcas, has trouble getting through the hydro dams. And it starts in the interior, their life cycle starts in the interior, they go out to the ocean, they spend 2 to 5 years out there, and they come back home to lay eggs and breed. In 1942, this dam went in. They did not put any fish passage. There's no way for fish to get past this dam. It is so big. And that devastated the tribal economy, the indigenous people that lived there. Their whole lives were based on salmon coming back every year. Their religion, their culture, their food source, everything. We were asked to certify that this dam met water quality standards in Washington State. And at issue here was whether or not we could require them to put in fish passage. Was this something we could do under the Clean Water Act if fishable waters is a goal of the act? Both our state and a downstream tribe certified it, and here's what they said. The Caldwell tribes said, this is a cultural area, the Columbia River cultural landscape, but it's been polluted, and even though there are intangible things that are important to us, it'd be really difficult to return to our old ways. But to them, it was important to make sure that the fish were restored, so they would like to have fish passage at this dam. On the left is a picture of the tribal leaders when the dam first went in, and they're standing at their traditional fishing area and they're crying because they understand that they will never see that area again. The state of Washington really couldn't ask the federal government to put in a fish passage at this dam, and the best we could say is we support the importance of ongoing discussions. Is this environmental justice? It feels a little thin to me, but it is what it is. I will say the good news is, in 2020, they released 1,400 salmon in a creek. Those salmon traveled 700 miles. They went through 15 dams to the ocean. 2 years later, one fish returned. It was a female fish. They captured it and they released her back to the place that she started. So for us and for the tribes, that's hugely important and hopeful that someday there will be fish passage and that these fish could continue their lives as they used to live them. So equality, water quality standards, permit conditions, equity, support for the tribe to return fish to the blocked area, and habitat restoration in that area. Justice, a fish passage, remove the dam, restore the cultural traditions and way of life. Okay, so in conclusion, respect of the environment is respect of people as well. We are one with the environment. We affect the environment and we have to respect not just the environment but each other because we all interact. And our society thrives, right, when we have access to clean water. And unfortunately, there are certain systems that disproportionately impact underserved communities, but governments can make a difference and provide a positive impact on those communities. It's important to have access to decision makers, and when we, as a governmental entity, embed that concept of environmental justice into our decisions, we create a situation where we can have thriving, active communities. Thank you. No questions? Any questions? Oh, we have a question. Yes, we have a question. There's one down there.
Okay. Mike.
And someone may need to interpret for me because it's hard to hear that.
I will do. Please come to the middle. Please come to the middle so that everybody see. And you are one of the very few who are bold enough and also being awake. You have a question.
Ma'am, you spoke about justice. So my question is, how do you change billions people mindset about justice?
Can you repeat that?
For environmental justice, how do you change the minds of people?
Interesting. Whose minds do you want to change? Whose minds do you want to change? Do you want to change the regulator? Do you want to change the people that are overburdened? All people. Yeah. Well, I will say it's a process, and there are techniques for doing what we call consensus building. And I'm not sure if it's changing minds as much as it's coming to a common understanding of what needs to be done and what is the vision of the future. So that's a quick answer, but I will say I have done this consensus building before, and it has changed the community. So there are ways to do that. There are techniques to do that.
Thank you, Adrian. So she deserves a recognition. Richard Kendra, please give her a memento recognizing her participation in this workshop. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, all the people have left from this side. Maybe there are some here. So anyone is bold enough to stand up and ask another question? No? Maybe madam who is talking on the phone may have a question. You have a question? Okay, let me pick somebody. Oh, I'm coming to the last row. So there must be somebody. Any students, not faculty? Yenapa, you have a question? Can I ask a question? Please stand. What did the previous speaker talk about? Oh, okay. Okay. So 45 minutes matadadru. So you didn't get to follow anything? Think about it. I'll give another chance. Any word? One word?
She's looking at that.
Okay. Okay, sit down. Okay. Let's go to the next speaker. Probably the
I would like
last.
to welcome last session speakers, Lois Grandin and Catherine Werner. Welcome you, ma'am.
Hello, everybody. So we get the great honor of being last. All right, so we're in between you and finishing up. But what Catherine and I wanted to do today is to really talk about what you've learned over the last 3 days, and then how can we learn, what are some of the things that we can bring all of this information that we've had and looked at today, and how we can leverage those learnings and take them away from here, okay? And so, are we gonna? So we want to use the example from last night, and I think Catherine gave you all homework to look at this example during lunch. All right, so the example we all learned this morning that there was a cracker factory in Harda and that they had a huge explosion last night. Okay, there we go. All right. So I, like Steve, did a little research. I did it during lunch and took a look at what's been going on at this cracker factory. And what I learned during like only 1 hour, Steve, I didn't do 3, but I did 1 hour, and I learned that in 2015, 2 people were killed at this area, okay? In 2018, the factory license was suspended, but then it was reinstated a few months later. In 2021, one of the owners was sentenced to 10 years prison, and then he's been out on bail. Also in 2021, an additional 3 people were killed due to other explosions. In 2022, the licenses to operate the factory were again suspended, but then reinstated a few months later. Are you seeing a trend here? And then in 2023, they failed yet another inspection, and then we have what happened last night. And so what I'd like to do is to ask our 3 volunteers.
Just before we ask the 3 volunteers, Lois and I want to express our personal sadness for the families that experienced loss in this event. Some of you all may have family in this area. And yes, it's our job to assess and correct and improve processes. But you can't do this in the absence of recognizing the personal impact of families when something like this happens. So, yes, we can learn from the history. This happened a long time ago, and we don't know all the facts right today. We're still learning. Stephen gave a good update on Bhopal, but still there are questions that were asked about accountability and how those are handled, and we don't know all those answers. I gave you the example in Vale with the Vale Mining Company in Brazil, and that incident happened January 2019, and still we're learning, and we're in the corrective action phase still of that incident from 2019. So these incidents happen all over the world. Okay, we're looking at this one because it happened this week in this country. So its relevance to hazardous materials management is important, but we fully recognize that these incidents, just like the ones we looked at in Texas, in Ohio, and other places around the world, they happen around the world all the time. And what's our goal? To prevent them from recurring. So again, our hearts go out to the families, and we'd like to dig into this incident a little bit more as part of our closeout and our learning from these 3 days. Back to you.
Thanks, Catherine. So Steve introduced to us, and he said it's very important for us to ask a lot of questions. And we should always ask those questions very quickly. Because why? Because people's memories would get fuzzy. And it's no fault of their own, no fault of anybody, but we don't always remember the facts as clear when time passes. And so we want to ask those questions immediately. So we have 3 volunteers. Would our volunteers like to come up?
We'd like to invite our 3 volunteers up.
Our 3 volunteers? Our 3 volunteers. And we got 3 volunteers that want to be able to help us figure out what are some of those questions we would like to ask.
And again, the incident, because it's just happened, who was able to do their homework and read a little bit more? I didn't get to see if Lois asked this earlier. Was anybody able to read a little bit about what happened on the break? Maybe? Okay.
Good, yeah, excellent.
Thank you. Well, for those who were able to read a little bit more, what you know is the newspapers are just reporting what they know at the time. It may or may not have all the facts yet. We don't know. So the object first and foremost is what questions would you ask to learn more about what happened, right? Because if you don't know what happened, you won't fix the right problem to prevent recurrence. So understanding and learning when there is an incident is most important.
I'm going to have to borrow the microphone. All right, I'm switching. Okay, so tell me your name and what college you're in and what year.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Meghna Pradeep from AMCEC Engineering College. I study BE third semester, Computer Science, Data Science.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Akshita. I study BE third sem CSDS from AMCEC Engineering College. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Varsha from CSDS department, and I'm studying in third year in AMCEC Engineering College.
So who would like to start first? What's a question? If you had an opportunity to ask some of the people that are part of that factory management, what would you like to ask them?
I would like to ask, like, what type of chemicals were being kept stored in that factory, and what kind of explosives were used in the factory to have such a great massive blast. So I would question that.
Yeah, did they have any emergencies, any protocols or something like that? So, yeah, and then what kind of treatment would they have, would they give for the injured people who got affected from the incident?
Yes.
I'd like to ask what was the facilities they would have given to the injured people, or what would they have given for their families, like funds or something else.
And then how about fire drills, right? Had they ever had a fire drill? Can you hear me? Can you all hear us? Okay. You know, maybe we would ask, you know, have you ever done some fire drills? Had you ever understood how many chemicals were in there and what did we have to do to reduce the risk? You know, we learned from Richard today about how to look at all the chemicals and understand and determine what they are. And so was a hazard analysis done to understand what those chemicals were and what were the consequences of those chemicals individually and together, right? Excellent. Anything else that you think of? Okay, one more thing. So my next question is, how could we prevent this in the future? So do you have any ideas?
And the information we have is incomplete about this incident. But what we know is there's some history that we were able to share with you. There have been other incidents, right, that have happened at this facility. So we know some facts from the other incidents that we were able to share with you. So as you think about those, perhaps there could be some items that come to mind. Again, you don't know all the facts, but so you can you can talk about some possibilities of things that could be done to perhaps prevent something like this tragedy from happening again. So if you think about it that way, then I'll offer you this.
We really don't know. We really don't know about the possibilities what had happened. It may be because of anyone's carelessness that took place, that this incident took place. But if we would think about that, we could arrange some fire extinguishers and some emergency fire drills so that they could at least minimize the effect. Not like we could not completely prevent it, but at least we could have minimized the effect of it. That's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you think about, again, building on what you said, perhaps if something didn't work,
Anybody have any other ideas on how we could prevent this in the future? Yes?
They can even, after these incidents, they can even give a training to the other faculty, other departments where this may happen for further future, and they can reduce it.
Training, and one of the other items that came up in our conversation is perhaps relook at the facilities. They'll likely have a chance to rebuild and perhaps modernize the facilities that were there. Again, we don't know all the facts. These are just some simple items to start to consider as this devastating event is investigated. And, I would just stress that investigation, you can also think of it as a learning team, again. And this is not necessarily for intentional things, but for human error related things.
So good afternoon, one and all. I'm Satish Subramani from Civil Third Year, AMCEC College. So ma'am, my personal thought about this accident is, like, not only this accident, let it be any accident, we can't blame on a person, like, this is my employee's mistake, no, this is my auditor's mistake, no, this is my CEO's mistake. No, nothing like that. If there is a problem, there is an accident, everyone are related to that. Like, everyone is responsible for that. Like, if it is an auditor's mistake, why did the CEO fail, or some other, like, plant manager or some manager, why did he fail to find out, like, what mistake the auditor would have committed? Or why did the auditor did not find out the mistake committed by his employees and all? So we have to learn from a mistake. As he showed before, it was already happened before in 2019, 2021. And now also this, like, governments, not only Indian government, any government let it be, they are allowing that. Again, they are giving the license to these sort of companies. At least people should learn from the mistakes, from the previous mistakes. But an incident which, well, like, let it be anything which is small today, might be big tomorrow. So we should be very conscious about that and find all the probabilities what would happen, what might happen, and let it be anything. So we have to rectify and find this.
Let's give an applause. Excellent summary.
Very nice, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'd like to recognize your passion to solve the problem, taking that passion into the workplace and bringing that level of leadership in to figure out and solve the problems is so important. So important. Thank you.
Yes.
And are you giving?
And while we're giving mementos, let's go ahead and give
Come
some
on up.
mementos here.
Come on up, please. Here you are.
Here you are. This is a peach flavored tea from Georgia. You're very welcome. There we go. A little closer. There we go. Thank you, ladies. Really appreciate your help.
Thank you so much.
All right. So let's talk about an environmental management system. And so if we take a look at all the risks that we've put together, we've identified what are some of the concerns, and understanding how those risks impact the environment around us, right? Whether it be the water, as Adrian talked about, the land, or the air, or the places around us. So it's looking at all the risks around our environment and what can cause harm to us or nature from living the lives they deserve to live. And then looking at what are those consequences, okay? And then an EMS really puts together a whole system, and it's documented so that it's a complete policy and procedure that helps us address all those risks. And remember what I said before, if it's not written down, it didn't happen, right? And then you're also going to have several action plans within that EMS, and you're going to have single belly buttons for each one of those actions that are going and making it work. Okay? Having those goals, having metrics that measure it, and having single points to help make that all happen. And so Catherine is now going to talk a little bit about how we can make that work.
This is a model from Deming that you've seen multiple times here over the last couple days. Plan, Do, Check, Act. This is just a classic methodology for continuous improvement management. And when done well, can also prevent catastrophic event. Again, where do we start? Start with planning. Who sets the vision? Who sets the values? Who sets the culture? We said it before. The leader. The leader of the company, the C-suite, gets together and sets the vision and the goals for the company, the ethics, and then shares those out with passion to the whole organization, right? Goals, objectives, targets, and then, what Lois said, each of those goals, objectives, and targets is assigned out to someone who's excited about it, responsible, and has the right knowledge to execute. This is obviously couched in terms of what are the regulatory frameworks that apply. We've talked a lot about those different regulatory frameworks relative to not only environmental, but Stephen introduced quite a few safety elements as well that are equally important to good management of an organization. Okay, so now we have a plan. You know, there are great plans that fail because they're not executed. Sometimes people spend a lot of time planning. Great plan, but then not executed. So good people on the team to get the work done, and you meet regularly, and you help them break barriers. You as the leader, remember, because you are all the future leaders. Your goal as the leader, be a service leader. Be the person that helps your people succeed, and then hold them up and celebrate their success. And that will help people continue to want to do all those right things. Okay, occasionally, right, there's human error. We talked about 6 Sigma. Humans generally, can work at 3 Sigma, but with good processes, we can get a lot closer and a lot improved. So when things don't go exactly as planned, you want to check your processes. Make sure you have the audits. Proactively check your processes, not just when things fail, right? That's a big lesson from today. And not only that, but if you have more than one location, be sure to share your lessons learned right among your locations so that you don't repeat the same lessons at other places. Okay, and ultimately, when you check, then you take additional actions as necessary, right? Revise and update the plans. Like what Lois said, that the written plan is only as good as the paper it's printed on or the computer screen it's on. It has to be used. It has to be a living document. Having a great binder, anybody have a lot of binders, 3-ring binders? Remember the days of those? On your shelf. You can have a great plan on the shelf, but if you only open it once a year, it is not always a useful plan. So keep those plans living and keep them updated. And those will help guide your business. And as new people come in, because of course your people will be promoted, right? And so as they are promoted into new jobs, you'll have new people coming in to learn and train on these new processes. Finally, we'd just like to conclude with a very warm thanks to this organization, AMC, this beautiful facility, and for having us and hosting us, and for all of your attention. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much. We'll entertain any questions. Thank you. Any closing questions? All right, I'm going to turn it back over to somebody who is in an official capacity to give us any additional guidance that we might need. And while we're waiting for that guidance, I'd like to just say one word to the students. You have a very bright future, and it's been just a delight to meet and get to talk with so many of you. And to the faculty, thank you so much for, again, the warm welcome, for hosting us, and really making sure that we can support all these great students with this workshop. So thank you so much, again, to everyone for your participation. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the last part of the 3 days event. This is valedictory function. Quickly, I request all the staff members of AMC Engineering College, AMC College, to occupy the front chairs. We will conclude the event in just 45 minutes from now. There are certain cultural events, felicitation, there is a program. Please occupy the front chairs, all the staff members, professors, associate professors, assistant professors, those who are happily enjoying the evening snacks and tea. I request all of them to come to the front chairs, occupy the front chairs. Quickly, we will conclude the program. Yes, you have been cooperating for the last 3 days, a lot of inputs, a lot of academic discussion, a lot of deliberations, a lot of inputs given by the delegates, and a lot of experienced people have shared their thoughts, the questions, and a lot of discussion is happening. It has been a wonderful time for the last 3 days for all of us. It's a great event, certainly. Quickly occupy the front chairs. Just hold your breath for another 1 hour. We will relieve you from this hall, and you can enjoy your evening. I'll just give the flow of the program, what we'll be doing in next 1 hour. I'll be inviting all the guests to the stage, and there are concluding remarks by our Executive Vice President, followed by concluding remarks by Dr. Rampur Vishwanath. Then there is a distribution of certificates and honoring the guests, a small event. There is a photo session by the delegates, with the delegates, and the heads of the department, deans, principals, and academic advisor of AMC group of institutions, followed by a group photograph with the RV group of institutions, the students have come, then AMC Engineering College students. This will take about 25 to 30 minutes of duration, and then followed by cultural events. Cultural events, the flow is like this. Miss Duty, Bharatanatyam, Mr. Madhukar, Carnatic music, Miss Sneha, Kathak dance, Miss Darshani, Mohiniyattam dance, and Miss Bhumika, again Bharatanatyam, Miss Preeti, Yakshagana, Mr. Shashankan team, Western dance. This is the flow of events, and each one of them are given about 5 to 6 minutes to perform on stage. So this is how we are going to do. So I request all of you to cooperate. The last moment, yes, as I mentioned, a little bit of energy is required, little bit of cooperation is required, a little bit of commitment is required. Since the delegates have come from US, they shared their knowledge. It's a great event. Yes. Harini madam, shall we start the program? Shall we start the program? Yes. 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 Here it goes. I invite all the guests to grace the dais. We'll start with Dr. Rampur Vishwanath sir, Miss Kendra Stroer, Miss Adrian P. Borges, Dr. Brandon, Miss Catherine, Louis O. Brandon, Robert A. West, Mr. Stephen Bennett, Mr. Robin K. Spencer, Mr. Richard Phillips, Mr. Rahul Kaluri, Executive Vice President of Paramahamsa Foundation Trust and AMC Group of Institutions, a big round of applause from the audience to all the delegates. And now I invite the academic advisor of AMC Engineering College, Dr. Nagaraj sir, and the principal of AMC Engineering College, Dr. Kumar, to grace the dais. And principal of AMC College, Dr. Sudarshan sir. Please take the chairs. I request Sri Rahul Kaluri, Executive Vice President, Paramahamsa Foundation Trust, to give the concluding remarks of 3 days event. Good evening. So So first and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all of you joining us today, and especially the delegates here from the USA for their invaluable expertise that they've given us, invaluable expertise and knowledge that they've given us over the last 3 days. It's truly an honor to be standing before such distinguished guests from all around the world. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation for the organizing committee and the volunteers who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. And without their dedication and hard work, this wouldn't have been possible. As we gather here today, it is crucial to recognize the importance of hazardous materials management in our collective pursuit of a safer and more sustainable future. And this is in tune to what we have recently seen in the very saddening disaster in our country. Hazardous materials pose significant risk to human health and the environment, necessitating comprehensive strategies for their safe handling, transportation and disposal. This workshop has served as a platform for us to come together and exchange ideas on best practices, emerging technologies and regulatory frameworks. And I'm confident that the knowledge and experiences garnered here today and in the last 2 days will have a lasting impact on each participant's work and will contribute to the development and effective strategies of health and safety in our country. Together we can build a safer and sustainable future for our communities. In conclusion, I would like to once again express my deepest gratitude to Mr. Rampur Vishwanath sir for making this possible, and also for being very patient with us. And over the last 3 days, all our guests have been very humble, very kind. And just a few minutes of conversation, you will realize the plethora of knowledge that they have and the immense learning that can be possible if we choose to learn. May the knowledge gained from today and the last 2 days continue to guide us in our efforts to protect our planet and its inhabitants. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I invite Dr. Rampur Vishwanath sir to give his concluding remarks, one, then how he felt for last 3 days, and then how we can take this particular event forward in future.
Thank you very much for nice introduction, Dr. Prakash, and thank you very much for the whole 3 days patiently, some of you, patiently sitting and listening to our speakers. All this opportunity happened because of the magnanimity of AMC institutions management, with the leadership of Executive Vice Chair Ms. Rahul Kaluri, and the chairman of the institutions, Dr. Paramahamsa, and the vice chairwoman of all the institutions, Mrs. Geeta Paramahamsa. The whole family, that includes Ms. Monica Kaluri, the whole family believes in your education. I have talked quite a bit with the family. Every word that they talk about is their involvement in the educational institutions that they built over the years. You are lucky. You are in a college where the management would like to see that you all progress. Very few institutions, I can say, believe fully in your education. For the last 3 days, all my friends sitting here, coming from the United States, they try to be at the right time here, get ready, 6 o'clock, wake up, have the breakfast and be here in time. And they tried their best to share what they had in their mind, the training they had, the experience they had. They shared all that with love and affection for all of you, for the students, the faculty from this institution, plus other institutions nearby or in the city. I have not seen a big number like 450 registrations. This is our first college or institution where we had the largest number of attendees. We have taught the students anywhere from 50 to 350, but you exceeded that number to 450. You may all think that I try to embarrass you by going near you and asking questions, very uncomfortable questions. My goal, my interest was not to embarrass you. None of our team members believe in embarrassing you. Our goal was to see if some of you understood, some of you had questions, those who did not want to come up or get up, I encourage them to get up. Not that to insult you and not to embarrass you, but to make sure you understood something from our 3-day effort. Even if one student fully understands what we were trying to do, we are happy with that. One student. But there are many students responded, asked questions, tried to know more, and that is a good thing. We see that process. I'm sure that in future, you may be a little more attentive, at least some of them, to make best use of the opportunity that was created for you. And so, if you have not fully understood now, maybe sometime later something will come up and say, oh, so and so said this. One word. And that one thing that you learned might spark your interest, might lead you something big. And that's what we are looking for. So please bear in mind, any workshop that you attend in future, it is for you, not for us, not for any one of us. So it is for you. Think about that. Keep that in your mind in future workshops, in future efforts. You are in good hands. You are in a great institution. They are offering you opportunities to learn. And I'm not comparing with all the institutions, I'm just saying that you are in good hands. That is, as one of my colleagues said to you, you have a bright future. I'm sure all the efforts the AMC institutions put in, and I saw the list of things they had, the items that they need to prepare for, the individuals who are in charge of certain items, and how they executed the whole thing. It's not just easy. It takes a lot of effort from our side and also your institution's side. It's not easy to conduct a program like this. You have copies of the modules provided by the institution. Make the best use of them. You have great opportunities in future. Your minds can absorb a lot more than we can absorb. I wish you best of luck. I wish you great future. And I'm happy that our team came here and shared some of their experiences. We would do it again provided we have good interest, need, and you would like to learn. We may come back, but it all depends upon you, how you utilize this opportunity before we think of another opportunity. And there's one recognition was requested by Lilith. Nikhil. So he would like to present a memento to one of our delegates. And so he requested me to give that opportunity. Please go and present it to Richard Phillips. Okay, thank you. Likith established a personal relationship with Richard Phillips, and you had the opportunity to establish personal relationship with any of my team members. I do believe that some have, and Likith came forward, requested me to present that memento to Richard Phillips. So I express very special gratitude on behalf of my team to the management of the AMC institutions. They have put in a lot of effort, which you will never come to know. All the background work was done by the staff, by the faculty, everyone related to this workshop. So I thank all of them again from the bottom of my heart for giving us the opportunity to interface with you. Thank you all, and thank you, and good luck, and best of everything that you can accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is really a wonderful display and your experience for the last 3 days. And we are there with you always, and the trust and all the faculty members, the professors, deans, principals, heads of all the institutions under AMC, city group of institutions, to support you in all possible ways. And in future also, we would like to have these kind of programs and sharing of knowledge by all the eminent delegates who have delivered their lectures for last 3 days, and we are with you. Thank you very much. With you means it's not just Dr. Rampur Vishwanath, with each and every delegate who is sitting on the stage, and with all the people who are with us always. Thank you very much. And now there is a very important event. It's a certificate of appreciation to be given to all the delegates by our Executive Vice President. I'll call upon Dr. Rampur Vishwanath to begin with, to hand over a certificate of appreciation by our Executive Vice President, and Ms. Kendra. Ms. Adrian P. Borges. Dr. Brandon Borges. Ms. Catherine Werner. Louis O. Crandall. Big round of applause. Big round of applause. I think the energy levels have come down. Hazardous materials management has really is boosting the energy. Robert A. West. Mr. Stephen Bennett. Mr. Robin K. Spencer. Mr. Richard Phillips. Thank you very much, sir. There is a small event of honoring all the delegates on the stage. Now I'll call upon our academic advisor, Dr. Nagaraja sir, to honor Dr. Rampur Vishwanath. Sir, there is a gesture, there is a procedure, sir. Day before yesterday, because of hurry and little bit of confusion, let me admit openly, we could not do the way we wanted. But now it's valedictory function and mic is in my hand, stage is with me. All of you are with me. So we want to do the honors the way we wanted to do. Honoring guests has got special relevance under Indian context. So we follow that. I request Nagaraja sir to honor Ms. Kendra. I request Nagaraj sir also to honor Ms. Adrian P. Borges. I request Dr. Sudarshan sir to honor Dr. Brandon Borges. Dr. Brandon. Miss Catherine Werner, at this side. Louis O. Crandall. I request Dr. S. Kumar, Principal of AMC Engineering College, to do the honors to Mr. Robert A. Wurst. Mr. Robert. Sir, here. Sir, this side. Sir, this side. Mr. Stephen Bennett. Mr. Stephen Bennett. Robin K. Spencer. Robin K. Spencer. And Mr. Richard Phillips. Thank you very much, sir. Give them a big round of applause. But this is how we wanted to honor our guests on day one. We could not do it, but this is the pride of Karnataka, the pride on what we call. It has got its own relevance, and this is how we will honor our guests. So we are really honored to have you, all of you, on stage, and ultimately we made it that all of you must be honored in this way, the way we wanted. That is Indian culture, Indian gesture, and we follow that system, whether a person is from India or any part of the world. Thank you very much. Now quickly, there is a photo session. I request the heads of department of AMCEC Engineering College, deans, principals are already there on the stage, academic advisor, and also the dean academics, and the organizing team to join for a photograph quickly. I request all the heads of the department